Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Total confession, we are pre-recording today because I've got to go to the doctor. We're getting very close to not having to worry about any of that anymore, but got some maintenance I got to take care of on the old voice here today. We recorded Thursday afternoon, so it's still fresh and it's new, and we're obviously rolling into a big game week tomorrow, big game day against Kentucky tomorrow, but want to make sure you know, a little bit different than normal, including the live commentary there at the end of the show, but we will have some fun at the very end. Our official pick for Miami, Florida State as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down when it's all said and done. Leading into that, though, everything you've come to expect. Plenty of recruiting talk with Jeff Sentell, our final thoughts on the other top games of the weekend, and as well, everything about these Georgia Bulldogs, including what some are saying about maybe the end of dynasties such as Georgia's in the SEC, and some criticism for Georgia for how it's used one of its transfer players, and the special steps that Georgia's taking to get one of its, at least at the beginning of the season, what we thought of one of Georgia's star players back on track. It's busy getting ready for Kentucky tomorrow. We're glad to have you with us for it. Dogs looking to bounce back. We believe they can. We're going to talk for a few minutes about exactly how it happens. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Hurting is hurting. The more invested you are, the more you hurt.
I gotta look myself in the mirror again and execute.
We had an opportunity to do it on Saturday. We didn't get that done.
And we just got to keep sharp, come together close as a team, look at ourselves in the mirror.
Everyone knows what needs to be worked on from themselves and as a team standpoint.
Have to have the hunger mentality, we got to come back better.
You can't be mad about the past, you know what I'm saying? And we just use that as fuel, you know what I'm saying? We had the opportunity to do something, we didn't do it. We didn't. So there's nobody that, we can't point the finger at nobody. We got to look ourselves in the mirror and be prepared for the next moment.
I felt like nobody quit. It's the biggest thing. I feel like that's our team. That's what you want in the locker room.
Move on. It's a long season. We got plenty of games ahead of us, so you can't dwell too much. We'll learn from those mistakes.
When people hurt, you usually get a better response, right? You get a better mechanism of buy-in or doubling down on something of knowing who I am and knowing what I've got to work on. So that part excites me.
If I could play right now, I would.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Another outstanding video from Cody Chaffins, I think setting the stage perfectly for Saturday's game tomorrow against Kentucky. And boy, we don't know how this season is going to play out for Georgia. It's a challenging schedule. Everything's tough. More on that in a moment here, obviously. But I do really believe in every word every Georgia player just said, every word that Kirby Smart just said, that I think the mentality, the mindset's in the right place for Georgia to do that. Over the course of our time today, we're going to talk for a few minutes about how the Kentucky game, as we said yesterday, can be a springboard on all of this. But when it comes to having the right approach, the right mental standpoint, I think this Georgia team is more than capable of putting that on display. And I think that some of that can be seen tomorrow because ultimately, I think the opportunity ahead of Georgia is a far bigger one than maybe it currently feels like, that maybe it's currently being given credit for being. Let me see if I can say this way. At the risk of coming across as immodest, every week on our show, we call it Go With The Flow. It's our picks show. We make 6 picks against the spread, and we document our picks. And over the course of the last 2 seasons, I'm 16 games over 500 with my picks. Now, I don't say that immodestly because I'll be the first to tell you that's not likely to last. Eventually, everybody gravitates towards the middle. And a 500 record, 50% right, 50% wrong, that's where all of this moves over the course of a long period of time. But when you look at the success I have had picking games over the course of the last couple of years, if you were left to ask the question of, well, how come that's even been able to occur? It's not because I'm some sort of former coach, former player, and I know, everything that's going to happen. You already know that's not true. I'll tell you this, most of the so-called expert gamblers are also almost what you might think of as like a quant, someone who's putting this complicated spreadsheet together, power ratings and originating their own lines and things like that. I can promise you this, I can barely do basic arithmetic. I'm not good enough at math to put some sort of elaborate spreadsheet together for why one team's going to be better than another and better than the experts think it's going to be or something like that. I just am not that kind of guy. But what I do feel like I do, if I were to be immodest for a second, what I do feel like I do pretty well is keep in mind and continue to remember that when it comes to college football, how we feel about something in a given moment is not likely to remain true for a long period of time. That no matter how true something seems right now, over the course of weeks, certainly over the course of months, over the course of what can feel like a long season, by the time you get to a new point in time, you'll have almost forgotten about what you thought in the past. Let me give you a case in point of this. You know, in week 1, we saw Florida State beat Alabama and look good in doing so. Alabama, by comparison, looked bad in doing so. I remember that week, though, as I was making the rounds and doing some of the interviews and things like that I do, a statement that I made that was pretty surprising to some folks at the time was, I know it seems crazy that, you know, Florida State's now beating Alabama. I said, but the truth is, and you maybe even heard me say this in this show, that if you got to go back and that if you had to think about what the rest of the season is going to be like, I would still give Alabama a better chance of making the playoff than I would Florida State. It seems like, well, Florida State's riding high because they won the game. They beat Alabama head-to-head. But I would still trust Alabama to make the playoff more so than Florida State, that what feels true in this moment is not likely to remain true necessarily over the course of a long season. And now, well, we've seen, unfortunately, Alabama beat Georgia. We've seen Florida State lose at Virginia. And so that prediction I made back then also feels like it has a chance of coming true. That we, I think, try to do a good job of recognizing that feelings just don't last. And trends that you think you see materializing have a way of disintegrating as more and more data comes in, which is important to keep in mind with Georgia here too. Look, there is real and legitimate reason concern for the Dogs. Of course, that's the case. But there is also far greater opportunity out there than some folks seem to realize. Let me give you an example of this. I want to read you a quote here. It comes from Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach at ESPN.com. And what Kiffin says here, and I don't think he means this as a negative towards Georgia or Alabama or any of the teams he might be referencing. It's just an observation that he's making. And what Kiffin says here, especially in light of what we've just experienced from Georgia, it just seems like the most true thing that could ever be said. But just keep in mind, what feels excessively true in this moment has a way of not being quite so true as more data comes in. Headline at ESPN.com says this. He says, the dynasties are over for teams in the bigger SEC now playing 9 league games. Here's the quote from Lane Kiffin in the story. Mark Schlabach is the writer. Kiffin says, in my opinion, the dynasties are over. Kiffin told ESPN on Wednesday. Alabama with Coach Saban and Kirby Smart at Georgia, where they had those rosters year in, year out. There'd be a bunch of wins by 30 points in the conference. He says those days are done. Now, to an extent, almost everybody probably agrees with this. Georgia fans may especially agree with this right now because it feels like the brand of Georgia football we're seeing, certainly on Saturday this past week against Alabama, is a far cry different thing from what we saw in 2021 and 2022 when Georgia at the time appeared to be unquestionably on its way to building a true dynasty, however you choose to define that. It seems like it is a little different now. And I don't dispute, just like anybody else, that what Kiffin is observing seems self-evident to me as well. It's just getting harder. The schedules are getting harder. The rosters of the very top teams, Georgia thinks of itself in that category, aren't quite as deep as they once were. All of this seems just obviously true to a certain extent. And yet what seems obviously true in the moment has a way of not quite continuing on forever the way that you think that it might. That, in other words, proclamations like this come out of, oh, the dynasties are over, the top teams aren't quite as good, there's no more dominance in college football. That seems to be a tough thing for Georgia because we've gotten used to seeing our team be dominant. And yet, keep in mind here that as college football is undeniably changing, there is also a way in which that change has the potential to help Georgia here too. And that while it seems like the dynasty era may be coming to an end and the run of dominance for Georgia certainly may be coming to an end, there are still some things that Georgia can take advantage of in a season like this that actually gives it a far greater opportunity than folks realize. For instance, as the College Football Playoff Selection Committee says it's now going to consider the quality of opponents and who you've played and strength of schedule in a way that it has not done in the past. And I've talked to some very serious people behind the scenes who believe the committee actually is going to do this in a way they have not done before. I'm skeptical. We'll see if it actually happens that way. But I can tell you people who are smarter and more plugged in than me have told me directly they do trust that this year will be different when it comes to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, which means the teams in the SEC who are doing what Georgia's currently in the midst of doing, a tough grind against a rigorous schedule of opponents, then maybe there's just a little more margin for error in a season like this than there has been in the past. I couldn't help but notice what SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey recently said. Sankey was in Athens for the Georgia-Alabama game the other day, and in a quote given to the AJC, I'll read this to you here for a moment. Connor Riley was the writer on this, says, when it comes to a 3-loss team making the college football playoff, Sankey telling the AJC, I could see that for sure. I think we were pretty close last year. I may have viewed it differently in respect to the committee's decision, but if you had not pulled a team in from the outside the top 12, you would have had a 3-loss team. So Sankey already trying to leverage for the idea that one of the SEC's top teams, even if it has 3 losses because of the schedule the SEC is playing, that's maybe a team that deserves to make the college football playoff. I also heard, if you know who the Bear, Chris Felica is, the gambling expert who now works at Fox Sports, he said that he was actually looking to place a wager on the possibility of a 3-loss team making the college football playoff, because in the SEC in particular, mentioning Georgia by name, either Georgia or Texas, one of those two is going to have a second loss guaranteed, with obviously the possibility there could be a third on the way here. And so the chances that this year the SEC does produce a 3-loss team that makes the college football playoff, perhaps this is a year in which that'll happen. So let me tie these two ideas together for a moment. On the one hand, when Kiffin says the era of dynasties is over, the era of dominance for the Alabamas and the Georgias and those kinds of rosters, that's over. Well, on the one hand, that kind of seems true. But on the other hand, as the dominance goes down, there is a chance, as Greg Sankey alluded to, the margin for error is going up. All of a sudden now, you don't have to be the best for a full 12-game schedule and a full 15-game season. You just have to be the best when it matters. And if Georgia can hang around and be in a position to be at its best when it can make the most impact late in the season, running through the postseason, then Georgia is just as alive as it ever was. Certainly that we believe that's the case. It could have been true last year. Obviously didn't take care of business in the college football playoff. It can be true this year. So Kiffin says for teams like what Nick Saban was, what Kirby Smart's been, that era of dominance is over. That's true. But it doesn't mean the success has to be over. That there still can be dynasties who leverage the current system for its own benefit of getting into the playoff with a little more in the way of the loss column, maybe not quite as dominant, but just good enough when you have to be, getting hot when you need to be. That can still be Georgia as long as it starts taking care of its business, including this Saturday against Kentucky. Now, let me shift gears to say exactly how it is that Georgia can do that. One of the things that seems like Georgia's in the midst of doing right now is trying to rehabilitate, both, in this case, probably emotionally, one of its what we thought was star players before the season began, who has fallen on hard times at least a little bit. Nate Frazier had another fumble against Alabama on Saturday. It's obviously really disappointing. But in this particular case, as I talked about with Terrence Edwards on the Thursday show yesterday, that you can't just write Nate Frazier off, and you can't just say, well, this is not a guy we need anymore. This is not, this is not a guy we can trust anymore. No, you still need Nate Frazier. Now, you need him to play better, but make no mistake about it, for Georgia to be as good as it needs to be, as good as we want it to be, guys like Nate Frazier have got to shake off that funk of whatever's creating fumbles and being ready to be something close to the contributing player we thought he could be. The good news is, as Georgia coach Kirby Smart has talked about this week, including going back to Monday, it sounds like Kirby is still a big believer in Nate Frazier and also a guy that seems to want to encourage him to be the type of player that Kirby believes he can be. This is what Kirby said about Frazier going back earlier in the week.
Yeah, they love each other, man. Nate was the fact that Nate was cheering and happy for Chauncey shows what kind of culture we built here. He was pumped for him, and he was crushed for himself. He's upset and knows that he's got things he's got to work on. He's got to continue to improve at. Nate's not afraid of hard work. He's not afraid to go out there and get to work and improve, and we're going to continue to do that. Look, you don't get through this gauntlet of SEC games without having multiple backs and having guys ready, and I feel good about that room.
What Kirby Smart says there ties back into what we said off the top of the show. The era of dominance may be over. The so-called dynasties seems like they're dissipating, but Georgia can still be the best team in the country, even though it didn't play like that against Alabama. But you got to stay together. You got to keep working hard. And you've got to shake off whatever doldrums that certain players may have found themselves in. It sounds like Kirby Smart trusts Nate Frazier to do that. One of the things that he mentioned specifically in that particular clip was the fact that Nate continues to be such a hard worker, even in the face of some setbacks. And on Wednesday, when Kirby was in the SEC Coaches Teleconference, this is audio only, he also talked more about the kind of hard work that Nate Frazier continually puts on display.
He always works hard, and you don't really necessarily change how somebody works, right? They work hard, and we appreciate that. There's not a week that we go out there that we don't talk about, emphasize turnovers, ball security, and those things. I don't think there's a team in the country that's not repping and practicing ball security. So it's something that he's got to overcome. He's got to play with confidence, and it comes with habits, and we're going to keep working on those with him. But he's been great. He works really hard and has a positive attitude, and that's what you look for in a teammate.
Let me see if I can tie these two topics together that we've addressed off the top of the show. Georgia's maybe not as dominant as it once was. Seems obvious that it isn't. Dynasties such as what it seemed like Georgia was building when Alabama has built, maybe they're going away too. Most people believe that what Lane Kiffin said is probably true and probably correct. But boy, there are still some opportunities to take advantage of a little bit more margin for error, to get good at the exact right time, hot when you need to be. But you got to get your superstar players going. And Nate Frazier is one of those guys that has some of that star potential. I know his confidence is probably a little lower than you'd like for it to be coming off another fumble in a key spot against Alabama. But boy, for as hard driving and tenacious as Kirby Smart is, it also seems like he gets this part right a lot too. How you build a guy back up. How you show a guy you're not going to quit on him. And listen, if it were me, I might be looking to get Nate Frazier involved early on Saturday to let him know right away, you're still one of our guys. You're still a guy we trust. You're a guy we need. And before this season's done, you're a guy that we think is going to make a big play for us. And I got to tell you, against Kentucky on Saturday would be a great time for Nate Frazier to get back on track. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We are glad you are with us here today. Fun to have you as a part of the program. Video, normally it's 10 a.m., of course, on demand anytime after that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Podcast, wherever you find them. Just thrilled to have you as a part of the program today. Also, a big thanks to our friends at Kroger for being a part of this show here today there as well. Also, Kroger's got a great thing going on in the community right now that you need to know about, teaming up with our friends from Georgia Natural Gas. How about this? Your chance to get a $100 Kroger gift card from Georgia Natural Gas when you enroll with Georgia Natural Gas. You'll get a great new rate on your service from Georgia Natural Gas, but you'll also get that $100 Kroger gift card. It really is a win-win situation here. That grocery budget, you're going to have extra money there for that, but also saving some on your natural gas bill. As you move towards that cold weather season, thinking about natural gas, obviously an important thing. So Kroger, Georgia Natural Gas, get you covered on that. Let me give you the website to find out more about this. It's gng.com. That stands for Georgia Natural Gas. gng.com/Kroger100. That's gng.com/Kroger100. There are some terms and conditions apply. You can check that out there. But the best thing is when you sign up with Georgia Natural Gas, when you get that great service, that great rate from them, you are also, as an add-on, going to get the $100 Kroger gift card. And who wouldn't want that? It's just another great way that Kroger is doing some great stuff in the community right now. In this case, teaming up with Georgia Natural Gas. The website, one more time, gng.com/Kroger100. That's gng.com/Kroger100. Kroger 100. All right, we've got Jeff Sentell coming up in a moment. We'll look forward to talking to him, getting some UGA recruiting news. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And this is one of those moments I do have to let you know that there is some, I guess, mild criticism of Georgia out there today. And it's some criticism that I hope that Georgia can provide an answer to. We are obviously seeing some newcomers to Georgia thriving in their new environment here. There are others that we're still waiting on. One of those I think that we're hoping for a chance to make a big statistical impact at some point in time is the transfer receiver from Texas A&M, Noah Thomas, who he drew some important penalties in the Tennessee game, did not seemingly play a lot against Alabama, and a lot of folks are now wondering, well, when will we see the best of Noah Thomas in a Georgia uniform? This has even gotten some national attention this week. A CBS sports writer mentioning Thomas as one of the transfer receivers who's still looking to make his impact here thus far. The CBS writer saying that in Georgia's 24-21 loss to Alabama last weekend, Thomas logged just 14 snaps. On the season, Thomas has just 3 catches for 24 yards, all that came against Austin Peay. CBS says he was the number 8 receiver in the transfer portal. His production thus far, though, hasn't matched those expectations. He's shown he's capable of being a number 1 wide receiver in an offense. Look what he did at Texas A&M. And Georgia, they say, would be wise to get him more involved going forward. We don't dispute that it'd be nice to see more of Noah Thomas here at Georgia, helping contribute to the passing attack. It's a little bit of a mystery as to exactly why that hasn't happened, other than the fact that the position that Thomas is mostly playing, the X spot, is one that Colby Young has thrived in thus far this year, and you really don't want Colby Young off the field. But is there a way to play both Colby and Noah Thomas together? That's certainly something that I've wondered about. And this week, Kirby Smart was asked about, hey, what's going on with Noah Thomas? And maybe why haven't we seen as much of Noah Thomas yet? This is what Kirby Smart offered by way of answer on that.
Noah's been great, man. Noah's another guy that is a culture winner for us. I mean, he competes so hard. He starts on the special teams. He rolls in and plays sometimes with Colby, but at the same position as Colby. And he hasn't gotten some of the breaks that Colby has in terms of when he's in the game, but he has a lot of the same similarities. We've had 2 or 3 shots that early in the year he would have hit, and he was wide open, but we had protection breakdowns. It just hadn't happened, and he hasn't pressed because of it. All he does is, what do we need to do to get better, Coach? Tell me what we need to do to get better. What do I need to do to get better? And he continues to grow and buy into that. And when you have that kind of culture, it helps you win.
So I take Kirby pretty seriously on that on both fronts. If you're watching the games closely, it does seem like, hey, maybe Thomas just got a bad break here and there, a pass interference penalty going against him, something like that prevented him from getting some of the catches he could have gotten. I think that's to a degree true. And while Thomas is waiting for his moment, it does sound like he's being a really good soldier at UGA, which I think is a good thing as well. And if we're going to make the theme of the show, big opportunity still out in front of Georgia, a chance to get back on track, your team chemistry, your culture is going to be a huge part of that. And if Kirby says that Noah's been a positive contributor to that culture, I think that matters on special teams, in the locker room, and everything else. So I trust that Noah's being patient. We're going to be patient here too. But for the Georgia offense to be as good as it can be, getting more out of Noah Thomas is really important. If for no other reason, then you want to quiet critics who are saying, well, how well does Georgia use all these receivers that it gets? You want to push back against that potential negative recruiting. Now, it's also worth noting here that while we're still waiting for a big moment from Noah Thomas, the other transfer receiver that Georgia's brought in, Zachariah Branch, certainly seems to be as good as advertised, with a chance to be better in a Georgia uniform than maybe he ever was at USC. He has been maybe Georgia's most explosive player thus far this season, and there's even more that maybe Georgia can do with him. Certainly this week, Kirby Smart doubled down on their belief that to be as good as they need to be, continuing to find creative ways to use Zachariah Branch, the other transfer receiver other than Noah Thomas, that remains important. And that's something that Georgia seems to have figured out in a way they're still working to do as it relates to Thomas. This is Kirby on Branch, the other transfer receiver.
Our defense is changing how they play us. I think it's hard because he's all over the place. You know, he's outside one time, he's inside one time, he's in motion one time, he gets handed the ball one time, he gets a screen one time. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to move him around, and I think our offensive staff has done a tremendous job of trying to find ways to get him touches. He also, it's important to keep his durability up. He's a punt returner, he's a kickoff returner, and he's a touch guy. And so we got to be smart about how we get him the ball, when we get him the ball, and he's got to take advantage of those. There was probably some missed ops for him too in the game that he has, that he's got to make. He's got to capitalize on every opportunity he gets because he is an explosive player.
So to summarize, there's still more Georgia can do with Zachariah Branch, but to this point, they've done more with Branch than they have with Thomas. But for the best version of the Georgia offense materialize, it's those veteran transfer receivers that have got to be almost the focal point. Zachariah, Noah, Colby Young. That seems right now to be the trio of the top receivers for Georgia. The passing attack is just better, it would seem, when you're throwing to them. Certainly in the case of Branch and Colby, and we think Noah Thomas can be one of those guys too. And how they're utilized this Saturday against Kentucky, that's going to be, I think, a source of curiosity for many Georgia fans if this is a day in which Noah Thomas really can get going the way that Zachariah Branch has seemed to be able to do time to time already this year. That's also around the doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, dog bites, things like that, we hope to see the dogs biting down on Kentucky on Saturday, but there are other kinds of dog bites we hope we don't ever have to see. We try to avoid the very dangerous, serious dog bites that perhaps you or someone you know have been victimized by. Negligent owner not taking proper care of their animal, and all of a sudden there's an injury, you've been knocked over, you've been bitten. That can be serious. And like any other personal injury situation, we think you ought to have your chance to fight for compensation for your medical bills, for pain and suffering, the other things related to that. Well, our friends at Zagoria Law literally wrote the book on how to win these kinds of cases. So please give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's dog spelled conventionally, D-O-G. 833-GA-DOG-BITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com, Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com. If you've been injured, bitten by a dog, our friends from Zagoria Law want you to have your chance to fight for the proper compensation. They've done this for all kinds of folks. They can do it for you. We're happy to have Zagoria Law as a part of Around the Doghouse. We're also happy to have Jeff Sentell here today, kind enough to accommodate us in a little bit different fashion. So we're happy to have him, and we'll talk to him here right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sentell, as I said before, we're doing things just a little bit differently here today, kind enough to accommodate us that way. Jeff, we'll jump right into it here. It was obviously not a good day for Georgia on the field against Alabama, but in your world in recruiting, it seems like that part still went okay. The atmosphere was obviously amazing. The theatrics, the spectacle, even if that one song did play a little too frequently, seemed to be all good. And from watching Before the Hedges presented by Kroger on Wednesday and just the chatter throughout the week, it seems like Georgia sold itself well to the huge number of recruits that were on hand. What can you tell us about that part of this?
Brandon, hey, first of all, great to hear you back, buddy. And I'm going to underscore in boldface, great to hear you back. I think, Brandon, Kaylee Mansell and I kind of joked about it, but it is the obvious truth is Georgia does this part of its game day operation and its football operation as well as anywhere in the country. Some storylines that mixed in is there was the same amount of players, elite players from across the country that were drawn to this game. And they left thinking, oh my gosh, Georgia's really got something. I can see myself there. You had players, including, Brandon, the story we'll get to on DawgNation.com of the son of a former All-SEC Florida Gator saying that Georgia is now his leader in the 2027 class. And I know that's kind of playing to the hits there for you. But you saw commitments, Brandon, and this is probably the big thing. I noticed at the end of the game, like one of my roles for DawgNation for game days is to take a lot of photos, recruits, games, kind of key moments. I swirled my camera around and I noticed I wanted to know what the recruits look like, what the commitments look like, Brandon. And I want to say there was a lot of stiff upper lips, if you know what I'm putting down here, Brandon, about how I guess I would say ticked off, PO'd about how Georgia's commitments didn't like the program they're already invested in, taking another loss to the Tide. That was one of our signature pieces of content on Before the Hedges this week. There's a lot of dogs now, a lot of commitments in that West end zone bleachers, man, that were like, man, I can't wait to get on the field against Alabama and revert this skid.
Yeah, I mean, I take that as really good news, if for no other reason than I just like holding on to that part of the recruiting process. And listen, we've all had our own way of making peace with what the current age and era is like. Obviously, the boardroom negotiations seem to matter more than anything else now, and that's just kind of the facts of the matter. I remember back the old days, what was it, DeAndre Swift that fell in love with Georgia because of 93K Day and G Day at the time. And, these big atmospheres have been a good entryway for conversations program with recruits. You'd like to think some of that kind of stuff still matters. How much of that old school vibe still does exist?
I think kids still fall in love with places, Brandon. Now, heck, Georgia had 2 commitments on a game day, Brandon. I went through my archives and they've never had 3. So that was a high for commitments on a fall game day. And that's one of those things. The commitments are happening. I think Georgia, very quietly, I don't know how many people noticed this, Brandon, but we had a way too early top targets for 2027. I'm sure you're familiar with that, where we rate the guys in each class that we think are a great fit for Georgia that also love Georgia. And the number 3 top target in the class, Kelsey Adams, for 2027 already came off the board. Part of that was location. Another part of that was Langston Hughes High School. They had 2 former Panthers that were now starting on the offensive line, and he thought that was really good karma. So that was an early commitment from really a top 50, top 60 overall player in the country. That was kind of earlier than what the news cycle has told us to believe about elite recruits like that. You had a lot of guys, Brandon, come out of the game saying Georgia's my leader. I think the main thing, and this is what Kirby Smart always advocates for with games like this, is he wants to have that marquee game that draws everybody in. For example, Georgia got a guy from California who's from Texas in the 2027 class that's committed to Texas, but finally saw Athens for the first time. And he's like, man, something's really different about Georgia, really likes Georgia, really liked the love he received in Athens. And, really it's about making sure, and bar none, Brandon, no matter what side of the aisle you fall on, whether I hear from people all the time now that say, recruiting doesn't matter. It's all about coaching. It's all about scheme now. Like, look at that defense. Look at all those 5 stars that just need to execute. I get that. I really do get that from people. But there's a lot of guys that come in there and they're just like, they want to be a part, Brandon, of playing in games like this. Like that atmosphere that Georgia swirled together with the lights and the sounds and the pageantry and just people really passionate about the dogs. That was exactly like what dozens of recruits have already told me they want to see, they want as the backdrop for their college careers. And Brandon, really, that's all you can ask for, especially when a lot of those out of state and out of region recruits could have went to Oregon, Penn State, could have went to other places, but they were there for Georgia, Alabama, I guess what, round 8 in the Kirby Smart saga there with the Crimson Tide.
And let's not lose sight of this. You have the great thing where Luke Bryan spending some time with Jared Curtis. Listen, Luke Bryan's one of the most famous people in America. Jared Curtis is a 5-star quarterback. I mean, to me, the full power and wattage of Georgia is on display in something like that, where a country music superstar and a 5-star quarterback can be rubbing elbows on the same sideline at the same time. That's big time. And listen, not everybody likes country music and not everybody, whatever, but that's a really famous guy and a really respected prospect, and spending that time together. There aren't very many programs that can conjure that image on a Saturday before a game. So even though the outcome wasn't what Georgia wanted it to, I do think the full strength of the Georgia program was very much on display through all that.
Brandon, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing I don't know if a lot of people are aware of. Guys like me and you that make this our daily bread and this is our vocations, we notice all these things and we compare them to past experiences. And I would say, Brandon, like one of those little things, everybody noticed the LED wristbands, everybody noticed the lights, everybody noticed a lot of things. But Brandon, there was a little subtle area there where Georgia also dialed it up. And what I mean by that is what you just alluded to, star power. Think about this for a minute, Brandon, because I was thinking about that earlier this week. Number one, you had Luke Bryan, country music icon, I guess. I don't know if you can call him legend, but I think icon would work. And then you go Anthony Edwards, AJ Green, Champ Bailey. It goes on. And during the pregame, Brandon, when Georgia did something a little bit different. You got Quavo, you got right there, you got James Franco. Georgia also did something a little bit different in terms of everybody follows him and knows him on social media, Coach Coop. One of the things he did is he usually, I see this every Saturday in the fall, is he will bring a select group of commitments or major targets out early to get on the field for pregame. And that was always maybe no more than 7, 8, 9. Well, this time he brought about 40. And those were the 26 commitments, counting the 2027 commitments. And then there were a bunch of top targets. And I mean, the DJ Jacobs, Jerry Andrew Beard. I mean, Jaden Wade, the 5-star quarterback in the sophomore class. They got them all there early. And you know who else was all down there early? Luke Bryan, Ant-Man, AJ Green, Champ Bailey. And they were all kind of red carpeting it a little bit, taking pictures. And those pictures were going on everybody's social media with somebody really famous, and it was going to draw a lot of likes. And that's something we haven't seen before, that type of engagement in terms of Kirby Smart was weaponizing the Georgia celebrity tribe, if you will, to bring more glory and to kind of bring more exposure to the program. And Brandon, these are impressionable teenage boys, their moms, their girlfriends, and everybody was with them there. And that really struck another big chord with everybody because they left recruits thinking about, man, is this what it's like every time Georgia plays a game? You got all these stars here. And that's the feeling that they left in a lot of minds, Brandon. Even those that were not convinced, they were like, man, Georgia is really the place to be. And one other thing is, I've heard this so many times, Brandon, is even recruits that were a little bit listening, talking to others, because there's different flavors of committed these days, Brandon. A lot of them use the word cemented, reinforced, validated the decision they made in the summer, which was Georgia was where they wanted to be.
Let me try to hit two other topics with you very quickly here just for a moment. Obviously, this Saturday, not the same patch, not the same atmosphere, but it's still a chance to host recruits. Give me a little bit of a snapshot of what we're expecting. It's an earlier start. Guys play late on Friday, a little harder to get there. But what are we looking at as far as a visitor list for this Saturday against Kentucky?
Interesting, Brandon. Number one, you mentioned travel. Well, one of the things that's happening, Jared Curtis is going to be back. He's Nashville.
Okay.
That's about 5 hours away. He's playing Saturday. He's playing Friday night. Him and his family plan to be there after that Luke Bryan experience where he got to kind of tailgate on his tour bus of all things. I don't know. Maybe famous people like you, Brandon, get to tailgate on country music stars tour buses before games. But he's going to be back in Athens. He thinks it's important. He deems it's important for him to watch Georgia, be very plugged in with the team he's going to play with. And he told me after that game, the Alabama game, that he just can't wait to get to Athens and play with those guys and help the team. That's kind of the biggest name. I think there's one name that's standing out right now, and it's kind of an unorthodox name because it's like a will he, won't he, does Georgia really want him? And that's, I believe his name's Ty Cummings out of West Lawrence High School. I don't know if you're following it, Brandon, but I think he's been the player of the week for the entire state 2 times already this year so far at the midseason mark. Of course, West Lawrence is a school doesn't usually send players to the next level. You have to go all the way back to maybe the late great Demarius Thomas to think of a really big one. But he's going to be in Athens right now. Brandon, he's got some good film, and I think his last football game, he set the Georgia single game rushing record with over 500 yards and I believe 8 touchdowns for West Lawrence against Baldwin. Committed to Georgia Southern, and Brandon, he's a little bit about 5'8" or so. He's about 180 pounds. Is that the ideal size for Georgia at running back? Probably not, but that's not going to be too far from what they're getting out of Zachariah Branch right now in terms of that game breaker ability, really elusive, those type of playmakers that just can't be checked in space. I'm expecting to see all the really strong commitments back in town. But it is Kentucky, Brandon. Like there's going to be a random 5-star from, I believe, the 2027 class that will show up. But by and large, the most people that will be there for this early a kickoff against this opponent after everybody and their brother and their cousin Eddie went to Georgia, Alabama last week are going to be the commitments and those in-state targets and those just out-of-state targets for this game.
I want to ask you one more question before we let you go. Let me remind folks before we do, though, we've got something great ongoing here with our friends at Cercheros right now. How about that Ultimate Game Day party courtesy of Cercheros? A lucky winner is going to get a $200 gift card to cater that party, whether it be a tailgate or a watch party there at your home. All of this coming from Cercheros, the fresh mix that we love. You can have that for the football fans in your life, your family, friends. You want to keep them happy. Those bowls, fajitas, the stuff that you can get catered for an event like this, of course, that's going to do it. You can also stop in and have a delicious lunch or a great meal at one of the Cercheros locations close to you. You already know the drill there. It's all those fresh toppings. They'll take the vegetables, they'll grill them up for you. They just take the special care to make sure everything you eat there tastes delicious. And that's even going to be true for your game watching and tailgate party. And you could experience that as being the big winner of our Ultimate Game Day giveaway, courtesy of Cercheros. Somebody's going to be a lucky winner and get a $200 gift card. So check out Cercheros.com to find out more about that. But also, if you go to DawgNation.com/tailgate, you can jump in and get your chance to be a part of that. It's DawgNation.com/tailgate. Register for your chance to win. Coming up on that deadline now, October 6th is that, so only a couple more days to get in on this. So do it fast. Get registered if you haven't already. Your chance to win. DawgNation.com/tailgate. All right, Jeff, real quickly here before we let you go. You made mention of this a moment ago. I want to get a final thought. 2027 offensive lineman looks like a good one out of Langston Hughes, obviously one of the power programs in the Atlanta area. His name's Kelsey Adams. He did commit to Georgia this past weekend. Looking ahead of that 2027 cycle, what is Georgia getting in Adams?
Interesting, Brandon. Number one, can we use the term grown man? Because
Sure.
how many people did you know that were shaving in the 7th grade with a full beard? Not many recruits I know that had a beard in the 7th grade. I think Bear Alexander was one of them that comes to mind. But Kelsey, he said, I was asking him about it this week at Langston Hughes, and he's like, man, how old are you? He's like, man, I'm 17. He's like, what do you usually hear? He's like, man, some people have said I look like I'm 30 years old. He's got a full beard. He obviously wearing the G as much as possible. Now, number 3 top target on the board for Georgia in 2027 is already now committed to the class, Brandon. And he did say he'll take visits. That's kind of what the normal is these days. He will take visits. He says he'll still take his officials. But he just really likes Georgia because it's close to home. The other thing, Brandon, that sticks with him is that, I guess, brotherhood, where he can look at he can look on the Georgia roster. He can see Bo Hughley. He can see obviously Dontrell Glover. He can see Isaiah Horton, and those are guys that also came out of the same Langston Hughes program that were already dogs. And what does that mean, Brandon? Because he's like, you know what? If I'm messing up, they'll check me. If I need some help, they'll honestly help me because they know where I've been and know where we all came out of the same place. And it's that brotherhood, that kind of connection that really makes Georgia appeal to him, Brandon. And we'll be very honest here. There were some schools he's already visited this year, I was told, that maybe didn't show him the love that Georgia did. And Georgia absolutely poured on the love. And he even went to Athens, Brandon. It's kind of like one of those folks that go to Athens and they're not sure they're going to stay the night or they're going to find a place to crash with friends or in someone's condo. He didn't know he was going to pull the trigger on Georgia until he's sitting in the room with Kirby Smart, Coach Stacy Searles, and his family, his grandmother, his inner circle a little bit. And he's like, you know what? I just think this is the move. And he committed to Georgia right there. And in the middle of all that pregame stuff, he's got to reach out to his edit guy and get his edit made so he can make his commitment. And it was really a full circle moment, Brandon, when he'd made his commitment, he had put it out there into the world. And then he looks up at the starting lineup and he sees that Bo Hughley and Dontrell Glover are both starting for the Dogs against Alabama. One of those has been in Athens for a couple years, and one of those is a true freshman. And also he saw how much Juan Gaston played as a true freshman. And I know everybody's talking about it. True freshmen in there, they're going to make mistakes, but there are some positives in that. Like a lot of recruits can look at the Georgia roster and see how quickly the freshmen are playing, Brandon. There's stats out this week that you've seen that 46% of the Georgia team are true freshmen. And a lot of those guys are getting on the field. And, you know, in this day of age about how you're going to allure players or how you're going to kind of charm players to come play for you. Well, dollars matter, contracts matter. NIL deals matter, but they also like to be able to get on the field at a powerhouse program like Georgia.
All right, Jeff, thank you for being with us and certainly appreciate that. Looking forward to seeing you in Athens tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. And, of course, as you said, with my voice now doing at least a little bit better, it's great to be talking to you in our normal circumstances here as well. So appreciate your time, and thanks for accommodating a slightly different schedule for us. And, of course, we'll talk to you again next week here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger as well.
Brandon, it's a funny story. I've literally got Peaches, the family dog, right here at my knee. She never does that, but I bet it's because she hadn't heard you in a while, and she's glad to hear those pipes back broadcasting on a DawgNation Daily, man.
Well, I appreciate that,
you, buddy.
Jeff. And Peaches, I appreciate you too. Thank you all.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, and it seems like as we were talking to Jeff a moment ago, it seems like it's probably a small consolation of, the atmosphere was still great. But you know what? I mean, listen, the story of football is told over the course of decades, if not centuries. No one game is ever fatal or final or anything like that. And so, I think that Georgia is still set up to be a strong program for many years to come. Maybe the era of dynasties, as Lane Kiffin says, is over. A lot of people believe that's true. But opportunities for greatness still exist, and how you take care of recruits on a Saturday like the one that Georgia just experienced goes a long way towards determining what your future success could be, and that part of the Georgia machine still seems to be operating quite well. Let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean right now. And boy, speaking of well-oiled machines, that's what those Royal Caribbean cruise ships are all about. I think you owe it to yourself to experience one of those as soon as you possibly can and get a chance to visit Perfect Day Coco Cay. Look, to me, of all the things that Royal Caribbean does well, and there is so much that it does well, there's nothing I love more than the private destinations, whether it be Perfect Day Coco Cay that's been in our life for quite some time, the new private destinations on their way, special shore excursions, for instance, like what's going to happen in Nassau in the Bahamas, other private destinations, like what's going to happen in Perfect Day Mexico. But the phenomenon that started it all was Perfect Day Coco Cay. And any Royal Caribbean cruise vacation I'm taking, I'm making sure that it's going to make that stop for that special, not even a special day, a perfect day at Perfect Day Coco Cay. And Jessica Slater is a wonderful travel advisor. She can tell you all about it. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Find out which ships are going to Perfect Day, when they're going to be there, and book yourself a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation as we head towards the end of 2025 and into the early part of 2026. Now, as we get ready to go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean, let's give some final thoughts here on some of the top games of the weekend. Now, as far as our official pick for Miami and Florida State, which is arguably the biggest game of the weekend, on our show at the conclusion of our video broadcast, we have what's called our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. So if most of you watch video on demand, if you'll go to the end on that, or if you're listening on podcast, you want to go find the video, you can hear our official pick on Miami and Florida State. We'll give that to you. I'm going to give you, though, a couple of these games in the SEC here right now. Alabama hosts Vanderbilt as a 10.5-point favorite. Something to consider about Vanderbilt, that I know it seems weird when you see a team that we typically think of as the bottom of the SEC playing the way that Vanderbilt is. It's important to note, though, this is not smoke and mirrors for the Commodores. Right now, Diego Pavia is playing one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the country. Vanderbilt has seemingly like 1 million seniors. They're an experienced team around Pavia. Y'all, they've covered 6 straight SEC road games. That's the sort of thing that a real team would do. They're undefeated thus far this year. They've won every game by 3 touchdowns or more. What Vanderbilt is doing is real. They beat Alabama a year ago. But to say that they would now go into Tuscaloosa and hang around inside of a point spread that's 10.5, that means they'd have a chance to win late. And if you're talking about Vanderbilt at Alabama competing to win late in this game, that's the sort of thing that, for the most part, only the top teams in the SEC do. And while Vanderbilt is much improved, I'm not quite ready to put them in a upper tier or even a middle tier for the SEC just yet. That feels like too much for me. This is not to disrespect them. I think that what they've done is significant. It's laudable. I do not think, though, that they are ready to take the next step from there. So the pick for me is Alabama minus the 10.5. Florida hosts Texas this week. Florida is only a 6.5-point underdog. They're getting points at home, but just inside of a touchdown. The reason why is because while Florida is a disaster and Billy Napier may be the next coach that gets fired, Texas has had its issues. This year, when it comes to the offense, and obviously Arch Manning, their numbers season long aren't much better than Florida's. Florida's offense has been miserable. Texas, as I said, hasn't been much better. But here's also the other thing. If you look at what has been kind of the college football playoff era for Texas, 2023 and 2024, in games like the one they're going to play on Saturday, favored by a touchdown or less, when you were theoretically playing something close to even competition, this is where Texas hasn't been great. Texas just 3-5 in 8 instances as a touchdown favor or less over the course of time dating back to the beginning of the 2023 season. They've also lost 4 of those games outright. So handling life as a favorite against relatively even competition, something that Texas probably doesn't play as much as it should, this hasn't come easily for the Longhorns. In this particular spot, I'd be surprised if they lost the game. I think you want to be careful if you actually bet it. But for the purposes of the contest that we do on Go With The Flow, I am taking Texas here minus the 6.5. I believe they'll win. I don't have great confidence that the Longhorns will cover, but for nothing more than a little bit of a bruised reputation if I'm wrong, I'll take Texas minus the points in this spot. I'll also briefly mention Texas A&M, the other power SEC program from the Lone Star State, hosting Mississippi State. This is one of those fascinating things where I think by reputation, people assume that Texas A&M is some macro program that towers over Mississippi State. You'd be hard-pressed to find evidence that's true. Since both teams have been in the league together since 2012, A&M does have a winning record against Mississippi State, but not by much. 7 wins against 6 losses dating back to 2012. By the way, Mississippi State was also ranked number 1 in the country as recently as 2014. You remember they were the first team ever ranked number 1 by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. By comparison, Texas A&M hasn't been ranked number 1 since 1939. So this idea that somehow Texas A&M is a far better program than Mississippi State is, you'd be hard-pressed to find evidence to support that point of view if you really wanted to make that case. It's also fair to point out that Mississippi State has, a little bit like Vanderbilt, has been far better this year than experts would have assumed. Their win total to begin the year was only 3.5. In the month of September, they've already surpassed that win total. But after a hard-fought game at home last week against Tennessee, my guess is some of the steam gets let out of the Bulldogs here this week. 14.5 points is a lot of points, but emotional home game, now going on the road, even if Kyle Fields not exactly been a house of horrors for the visiting team at times. I'll take Texas A&M minus the points. I've been wrong about A&M all season long, but it's been pretty good when it comes to Mississippi State. And so a lot of this is what I'm assuming Mississippi State won't do, more so than what I believe Texas A&M will do. Give me the Aggies minus big number here, 14.5 points, SEC action to consider, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, we'll be cruising around the SEC with you as well, coming up on Saturday at our DawgNation postgame show, live from the UGA Bookstore. And don't forget, take advantage of your opportunity to be at the UGA Bookstore if you're going to be in Athens on Saturday. That's before the game, shopping for all the great apparel, the Peter Millar, the Horn Legend, the Onward Reserve, the Johnny O, so many of the famous brands. You can also see the DawgNation postgame show after the game. I'll be there in full effect. That means taking your comments and doing the full show. After Kaylee Manziel did an awesome job of pinch hitting for me last week, I'm looking forward to being back. I'll also tell you this. I guess the rumor is massive autograph guests for the UGA Bookstore on Saturday, too. Jalen Walker, I believe, Nazir Stackhouse. That's 9:30 a.m. to 11:30. I believe we told you that yesterday. I believe they are back. I shouldn't say back. They are here on Saturdays. We're reminding you that one more time. So big stuff going down at the UGA Bookstore. It's our home away from home for every Georgia home game, and I hope to see you there. This week I can even talk to you, at least as long as I take care of myself. I can even talk to you, so come by and show us your face there at the UGA Bookstore, and we'll be glad to see you. And pick up some good-looking UGA apparel while you do. And as we wrap up here today, we'll do so with a golden shoe. Our guy, Jermaine King. We've talked this week about we'd like to see Georgia for its defensive music, get the crowd hyped up. We want something in the sort of EDM category, something that has kind of a pulsating bass rhythm that just thumps. that, kind of like you hear in a club. It's been a long time since I've been to a club, I can promise you that, but you know what I'm talking about. Well, Jermaine King does. He says, I think I found the perfect Sanford Stadium song to fire up the crowd and players. It's an EDM song, and the crowd can sing along to it too. It's the best of both worlds. It's the song Titanium. He mentions it by, I guess it's Sia and David Guetta, like I said before. I'm not very cool. He paired the song with the video that Cody Chaffins made last week and shared it with me. And listen, I think we're getting on the right track here. I think Jermaine's got a really good idea of the kind of music that works for defense. And listen, whatever gets the crowd hyped up is plenty fine with me. Jermaine King shares a good idea on that. We'll give him a golden shoe. Lousy, stinking Gators, they got nothing to be fired up about, and it's going to get even worse when Georgia beats them once again. It's already been 1,791 days since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. See you in Athens tomorrow. Then back Monday, DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Of course, I mentioned this yesterday and also said at the top of the show, we are not live today, pre-recorded because I had to go to the doctor. This is the only time, I think, for the foreseeable future, any of my voice maintenance is going to impact the show once again, but today it could not be helped. So apologies for no live commentary. I will tell you this, though. Still got some great content for you because Dari Pero, you know him from R.S. Andrews, a good number of our DawgNation colleagues getting together, just like we do on Go With The Flow, to make our official pick for Miami and Florida State. Of course, Georgia knows the Carson Beck side of this very well. Florida State looking to bounce back after a loss last Friday night to Virginia. What do we think about this game and what are our best bets? Let's give you a taste of Go With The Flow by providing that for you here right now. Hello, DawgNation Daily viewers. Welcome into our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. And speaking of R.S. Andrews, we like Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews each week, where we make our picks from a point spread perspective. And in this portion of our show on Friday, we like to give you a little taste of what the entire show of Go With The Flow looks like, feels like, sounds like. So let's do that right now with, and we saved, by the way, a big one for this space. One of the biggest games of the weekend, arguably the biggest game of the weekend, is Florida State, fresh off a loss last Friday night, thrilling fashion to Virginia, plays host to one of its hated rivals, the Miami Hurricanes, who has looked like the class of the the ACC thus far this season. Miami undefeated and riding high. Florida State, though, 3-1 after the loss last week. Miami 2-1 as a favorite thus far this year. Florida State taking care of business at home, undefeated against the number at Doak Campbell Stadium. The line here, though, sees Miami favored on the road by 4.5 points. This one obviously has major playoff implications. Mike Griffith, what do you think about the Hurricanes given 4.5 in Doak Campbell?
Yeah, the last time Carson Beck saw Florida State, I think he exited at halftime, and Georgia beat them 63-3 in the Orange. Very different Florida State and a different Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck has a really good offensive line and a really good run game, and I think that travels. So I'm going to take Miami and lay the points.
Miami and the points is Mike's pick there. Jeff Sentell, what about for you?
Lots of people focus on Carson. I don't know if he's even completely healthy. Smart folks will focus on both sides of the ball in the trenches where Miami is really strong this year. Some people say they're the strongest on both sides of the ball in the country. The one player I'm watching that is really special is the defensive end from Miami named Ruben Bain. I think he's going to give the Seminoles trouble. I think Miami rolls Florida State in this one. I think this is a 10 to 14 point win easy.
I thought that Miami really shoved Florida around a couple of weeks ago. That was certainly noticeable how much more physically dominant they were than Florida. Perhaps Florida State a different animal, perhaps not. Connor Riley, what do you think?
Do you feel in charge?
A little
Brother,
Bain.
they expect one of us in the wreckage. This is going to be a Miami win rather easily behind Mr. Bain, the best player on the field.
How about that? A little Bain reference from Connor Riley there, and some love for the Miami Hurricanes, too. Kaylee Manziel, what about for you?
My pick has absolutely nothing to do with the players on the field. It is more philosophical, if you will. I'm a big believer in regression to the mean. Life can't be too good. It can't be too bad. Eventually, everything has to come back to the middle. Miami has been dominating teams. Florida State's coming off of a loss. I don't know if Florida State gets the win, but I think they're going to make it competitive just because everything has to come back to the middle. There has to be balance in the state of college football. So I'm going to take the underdog, and I'm going to take Florida State.
Yeah, I agree with Kaylee on that for a lot of the same reasons you just mentioned. Obviously, it was not a good day for Florida State last week against Virginia on that Friday night, but they have typically been pretty strong against Miami at home. You're talking about a situation where Miami has not won in Tallahassee since 2019 and only 3 wins that Doak Campbell since 2011. So this is pretty clearly a spot when Florida State's been comfortable at home against the Miami Hurricanes. And at the risk of coming across like a hater, you got to tell the truth. For all the talk of, it's just a fresh, brand new looking Carson Beck, so different than he was a year ago, there's at least one stat that suggests that's not necessarily the case. Beck still throws a lot of interceptions. He's thrown 3 picks thus far this year against not the greatest competition, 3 picks thus far this year compared to just 7 touchdowns. So he's just barely better than 2-1 on a touchdown interception ratio. The wrong pick at the wrong time certainly gives Florida State a chance to keep this close. Miami's probably the better team. I don't dispute that, but I think it's worth taking the flyer here on the underdog because I think you've got to balance what you didn't see from Florida State against Virginia with what you did see in the muck and the mire against Alabama week 1. This is clearly a better Seminoles team than it was last season. And funny things sometimes happen in rivalry games. I'll take Florida State plus the points. Dari Pero, what say you? Do you want to go with the flow and take Miami? Dari giving you a tomahawk. Yeah, I think the music did not come through on the tomahawk chop there.
It didn't come through. That's all right.
We did see your tomahawk chop taking place, though.
Yeah, I mean, I like Florida State in this one. They're going to cover this game. They may win the game. This is going to be a close game. This game's got hate. This game, used to be one that was like 2.5, 3 decades of close games, wide left, wide right. This game with Castellanos as quarterback is going to ball out. The difference with Miami and their defense, which has been good, and their offense has been good, pushing around Florida's defense, is they haven't faced an offense like FSU. FSU's offense is going to be able to hang with them. And now we're going to see Carson Beck make mistakes late in this game. I like FSU. I think this is going to be an electric environment. I think it's going to get them back on track after losing and screwing up the Virginia game. I think it's going to be kind of like the Alabama environment. They know they can play these good teams at home. They have the confidence. They've been in a game like this. Miami hasn't yet. And so I like FSU in this game. I loved Oregon last week. I love FSU this week. Go Seminoles.
So should be a very fun game in the ACC. With that said, we'll now broaden things out. We'll look at the entire board. We call them our best bets. How superlative they are, I guess your mileage may vary on that. But nonetheless, anything else in the college football weekend, deep down the board, wherever you want to go, Mike Griffith, we go to you to kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I one jumps out at me. I mean, Notre Dame is a 15.5-point favorite playing a Boise State team that doesn't have Ashton Genty anymore. And, I like the Irish. They had a big road win against Arkansas. I think they've got momentum, and I just don't think Boise State's that good. So I'm going to take the Irish and lay 15.5 in South Bend.
Okay, Jeff Sentell, what about for you?
I got a thought and I got an anti-recruiting statement. First of all, I don't think Vegas has a bet for this, but if there was such a thing for the most abysmal performance of 2 former 5-star quarterbacks in an SEC football game, I think it would be DJ Lagway and Arch Manning, Florida versus Texas. My picks kind of spin off that a little bit, riff off that. I like the unders in Georgia, Kentucky, and Florida and Texas. That's what I would go for.
As I said during the Go with the Flow this week, though, just be careful assuming the bad quarterback is going to lead to low point totals. Not always the case, depending on where those turnovers might occur. Connor Riley, how about for you?
Yeah, one. I like total. Give me Maryland hosting a Washington team coming off a game against Ohio State, and they're having to go across the country. Maryland on a bye last week. They are a 6.5-point home underdog. Give me the Turtles there. And then, I mean, this is just straight shooting. Air Force, Navy, over-under for this game is 51.5. Hammer the under here. I've got over-under in the Air Force, Navy game, excuse me. And then I've got the Turtles of Maryland plus 6.5 points against Washington.
Is the Service Academy under thing? I haven't followed this stat as much in the last couple of years. Is it still as much of a rubber stamp as it always was? Because we got very low totals for a while. Yeah, we got very low total. Because keep in mind, the odds eventually kind of catch up with the trend. But what Connor's referencing here is Service Academy unders have just been, I mean, when two service academies play each other, I mean, just almost a rubber stamp. But we eventually got to the point where the numbers were so low, you wondered if it could keep going. But perhaps still a prevailing piece of logic on Saturday as the Falcons take on the Middies there for that. Kaylee Manziel, about some best bets if you got them from you.
Yeah, let's just be real. I'm not very good at these, but I am required to make them in this case. So I would probably go in with Jeff on taking the under in Texas and Florida. And I know you gave your big statement earlier about why we should avoid that, but I would feel pretty good about that. And then I've got Michigan as a 16.5-point favorite at home to Wisconsin. I know that there's not a ton to love about this Wisconsin team, but that's still a lot of points for a team that struggled with their passing game. So I would take the underdog Wisconsin 16.5. So those are my two, but I'm probably the worst person on this panel at picking best bets. So just go with my normal ones as a recommendation from me.
My best bets have not been very good either, I'm being honest with you. But going to get back on the horse again this week, too. And as much as it pains me to do so, I'm going to be on the other side of Kaylee. For my two official picks, I'm actually going to lay decent-sized numbers. I think the Michigan-Wisconsin game is an example of good team versus bad team. I think Michigan's pretty good. I think Wisconsin is not. So I'm going to lay 16.5 with Michigan against Wisconsin there in that spot for just the simplest reason of all. I just think that Michigan's a good bit better than they are. And I know these days no one's really cutting in line to bet on Clemson, given how bad Clemson's been. But whatever you think about Clemson right now, I promise you North Carolina is far worse. Now, this is a weird scheduling anomaly for the Tar Heels in that they have a week off both before and after this game against Clemson. You very rarely see that. So they've got this game sandwiched right where they want it. I don't think it matters, though. I just don't think that Bill Belichick has college football figured out. You saw the weird letter this week by Mike Lombardi, their GM. This is just an unserious football program with a lot of guys who are just cosplaying as college football people. One thing that Dabo Swinney still is a college football coach. Is he as good as he once was? Maybe not. Clemson's clearly not quite the same level of program it once was. I don't think it takes much to beat Bill Belichick right now. Clemson is a 13.5-point favorite. I'll take him to cover that number. And if you're just dying to attack the Texas-Florida game, which is a really fun game to watch, here's the way that I would do it. If you see this line move in the direction of Texas at all, especially if you can get it like 7.5, which as I'm speaking right now, we're recording on a Wednesday. By Friday, it's either happened or it hasn't. If you can get it up to 7.5, I would at least consider doing what's not usually very good advice in college football, sometimes works in the NFL. 7.5 in the NFL is one of those magical teaser numbers where you get a 6-point teaser with two teams going inside of a field goal for a spread that starts outside of a touchdown. I would tease this down to, 1.5 that's inside of a field goal and then look for another game to pair with it. The game that I had suggested was Cal hosting Duke as a 2.5-point underdog, teasing that up to Cal plus 8.5, just asking them to keep it reasonably close with a team traveling 3,000 miles for a game that's going to start darn near midnight. I kind of like teasing Cal up to plus 8.5. Connor, I'll bring you back in, though. You had a different idea on this. Also, if we get a little bit of line movement of someone you could tease with Texas, tell the audience what you told me off the air you potentially liked as a teaser partner for Texas.
Yeah, I kind of like if you can throw in again because it's in a similar spot right now with that Louisville or with the Texas Florida game. Louisville is a 7-point home favorite against Virginia. The Virginia team coming off a big-time win last week over Florida State. I think Louisville's a pretty good football team, and so I think that's a spot where if that number gets to 7.5, you throw them in Texas and a teaser together and you simply make profit.
Yeah, and so people can understand something. The only teasers that ever make any sense, and this is mostly in the NFL, 7.5, 8, 8.5, or basically like 1.5, where you're getting from inside of a field goal, outside of a touchdown, or outside of a touchdown, inside of a field goal. By the way, it does not work in college football because there's too much disparate results in the outcomes. This is not likely to win, but it is fun. If you view Texas as a can't-lose team against Florida, that becomes a free space, and all you got to do is pick one other game with 6 additional points of spread value. So it's not likely to win, but it's pretty fun. I would at least keep my eye on some sort of teaser with Texas if that line gets on up so you can get the additional value. Dari, those are my thoughts. The 2 official picks, both Clemson and Michigan plus the points. Maybe some fun with Texas if we get some line movement. What do you think about your best bets for the week?
Yeah, it's time to get on the positive side here. I'm kind of hovering around 500 on these. I like JMU, and I'm going to lay the 19.5 points against Georgia State.
Okay.
I think they're going to blow them out. I also like Penn State to go on their first road game across the country at UCLA, laying 26.5 points. I love Penn State to cover that big number on the road and just take advantage of a dumpster fire of a program that UCLA is right now. We may even have another coaching change before kickoff. Who knows what's going to happen there? But the only thing I do know is James Franklin does not disappoint when he gets to take advantage of wounded, broken down programs. He always shines in these moments. So take that with confidence. Go make some money. 26.5 points cover for Penn State.
So there is something to be said for if you've really got to win a game, always nice to be backing a coach that has made it very clear he knows what the spread is. Always a pretty good thing. But, boy, these interim coaching staffs, they make me nervous sometimes. So buyer beware on that. But very, very interesting picks when it comes to Dari Payro backing the Penn State Nittany Lions against what is maybe the worst team in all of Power 4 right now, in the case of, certainly among the worst, in the case of UCLA. Fun action there, too. If you want to see the rest of our picks, Georgia, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Alabama, the full official pick on Texas and Florida and everything else, check out this week's edition of Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. That is on the DawgNation video channels here right now. And, of course, with that said, we'll jump back into our R.S. Andrews cool down here right now. And, of course, we hope you're watching Go With The Flow each and every week. We're dropping on Wednesdays now. It's become really popular at that time. We've gotten a great groundswell of support by just putting the show out a little earlier. I don't know if you call it intelligence, but if it is intelligence, you can be a little bit more actionable intelligence by having a little bit more time to decide, do you want to tail us? Do you want to fade us? That's your choice and your business, whatever works for you. Of course, always done responsibly, but dropping the show on Wednesday seems to work, and it's fun to be able to give that to you here as part of the R.S. Andrews cool down, too. And speaking of R.S. Andrews, of course, cooler weather will be here soon, so get that heating system tuned back up and ready to go for a cold winter that will eventually be. We've had a little taste of that this week, more of that on the way. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. You can trust them on all of that. Plumbing emergency, don't let that ruin your weekend. Lots of good stuff going down with R.S. Andrews. They stand ready to put a smile on your face because story after story, that's what they've been doing so many times. So we love having R.S. Andrews a part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. We love all of you too. I'll see you in Athens tomorrow. Back Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger.